Well, UN officials and local health workers are preparing to roll out a mass vaccination programme for polio in Gaza, which will rely on a series of limited pauses in fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas. The World Health Organization says it will need to vaccinate at least 90% of children aged under 10 for the campaign to succeed. Its campaign was organised after a 10-month-old baby was partly paralysed by the first case of the virus in Gaza in a quarter of a century. On Saturday, medics vaccinated children at one hospital in a symbolic move ahead of the official campaign. From Jerusalem, our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell reports.
Just 2 drops. As the UN begins vaccinating against polio in Gaza, a dose is easy to give. But carrying out a mass immunisation campaign in a combat zone is a huge challenge. Parents of the first vaccinated children are relieved.
I was worried and afraid because this is scary, the polio disease. This disease makes the children unable to move.
Baby Abdul Rahman was crawling early, but now his mum worries he'll never be able to walk. He was the first child found to have polio in Gaza in 25 years, and it paralysed his leg. Because of the war, he wasn't vaccinated, and now medical care is limited.
Aboud wants to live and be treated. He wants to live and walk like other children. I feel a lot of guilt that he didn't get the vaccination, but I couldn't give it to him because of our circumstances.
Displaced 5 times, the baby's family now lives in a crowded tent camp in Deir Balach in central Gaza. Raw sewage flows through streets nearby. Conditions are ideal for diseases to spread, especially polio, which is highly infectious. Since discovering the virus, UN agencies have been racing to set up an emergency mass vaccination programme. And with war raging, they've negotiated 3 localised 3-day pauses in fighting with Israel and Hamas. UN officials say the plan is not ideal, but it's workable. With no end in sight to the war, the hope is that at least one new source of suffering can be eliminated. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, still with me is my colleague Mohammed Taha from BBC Arabic. Mohammed, we are seeing some live images now of the vaccination rollout actually underway. We're seeing images from a hospital in Deir al-Balah where babies and children are receiving the polio vaccinations. How significant is this in what was potentially a humanitarian crisis with the outbreak of polio?
It is very significant. It is a very happy moment where we see some kind of normality of life in Gaza, where children were going to hospital to have vaccination. It is very, very delightful moment in the midst of all the wars that's happening in the West Bank, in Israel, and in the northern of Israel. And funnily enough, or I don't know, it's not funnily, it's hard to describe, but not too far from this location in Al-Brej refugee camp, there were Israeli shelling, and 1 person at least were killed, and there were a shelling and a Shuja'iyya in eastern Gaza, and 1 person at least killed. But people are really adamant, as you can see, the 2,000 workers from the local health authority in Gaza, and with the cooperation of the World Health Organization and the UNICEF and the UN officials, 2,000 people are really determined to have this campaign successful as a successful event.
Well, Mohammed, thank you. That's my colleague Mohammed Taha from BBC Arabic.